and all for coming. One of the great things about CAMRA is that we try to find the truth, and so we try to know as much as possible about the conditions on the ground level and not have to rely on common media to do so. Today we'll hear from Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, who can give us this crucial insight on the realities of life in Jerusalem. Fleur grew up in Gibraltar and studied law at King's College London. She qualified as a barrister in Middle Temple in 1997 and practiced in London before immigrating to Israel in 2001. In Israel, she worked at JDC in resource development for Europe and later became the executive director of Tikva, a non-profit organization saving abandoned and abused Jewish children from the former USSR. In 2011, she set up her own communications consulting business, Message Experts, and does consulting work for large corporations as well as non-profits. In May 2016, she became a city councillor in Jerusalem, and in February 2017, the leader of the opposition. In 2018, Fleur was re-elected to the Jerusalem Municipal Council and was appointed to Deputy Mayor, Foreign Relations, Economic Development and Tourism. Fleur is currently the only British politician in Israel, and she is involved in the advancement of women's rights and marginalized population groups in the city, in economic development and the fight for a pluralistic Jerusalem. Fleur is also a member of the Likud Central Committee. So without further ado, I'd like to present to you all Deputy Mayor Fleur Hassan-Nahoum.
I'm here, but the camera's off. You have to open it.
Oh, that's okay. Sorry, everyone, just some technical difficulties. Is it something with the settings? You may need to allow.
No, I just had a Zoom, so it's not me.
Ah, okay. And when you click on start video, what does it?
It says your host. You cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay.
That's you, dear.
Yes, I will just tell Millie now. Just a second. Okay, Fleur, could you give it another go?
Yeah, here we go.
Great.
Okay, everyone. Hi. Hi, everyone. Hope you're all well. It's really wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be with your amazing organization that does so much to combat the delegitimization of Israel in campuses. I was in university quite a while ago, and it was just the beginning of the kind of unpleasantness. But I can't begin to imagine what it is that you guys are going through now, because I know that things have gotten a lot worse. And so, you know, you're all brave people and you're all our ambassadors, and keep up the great work that you all do, and the organization like CAMRA. So I'll tell you a little bit about my work in Jerusalem, the challenges, some of the opportunities, and of course, I'd love to hear your questions, because it's always much more fun when this is a conversation and not just a lecture. So I've been, as Ethan was saying, I've been the one of the deputy mayors. We're like a cabinet. So there's a few deputy mayors and people have different responsibilities. My responsibilities, as you heard, are in foreign relations, economic development, and tourism. You know, tourism, I never thought it was going to be so challenging. And then the corona hit. So we went from the height of the numbers of tourists in Jerusalem ever to the lowest point ever in tourism, which of course is very depressing. But yeah, that's one of my portfolios. And I want to talk a little bit about Jerusalem, explain a little bit about the setup, the demography, the main challenges, and then we'll talk about what things that we're doing in order to move forward and to utilize our wonderful potential in the city. So Jerusalem is the largest city in the country. It's also, it's got almost 1 million people, which I know doesn't sound like a lot compared to London or other big cities, but it's 11%, 12% of the actual population of the whole of the state of Israel. So it is the biggest city in the country. We also home to the 2 largest minorities in the country and the 2 poorest minorities in the country. And those are the ultra-Orthodox community, the Haredim, and the Arab community, the Arab residents of East Jerusalem. Now, these 2 population groups, for different political and cultural religious reasons, which I'll get into in a second, unfortunately live with high levels of poverty numbers. And our biggest challenge in the city, and that makes us also the poorest city in the country, which is very ironic that the capital city of the country is also the poorest city in the country. Now, the reason why these population groups are problematic economically, there's different reasons, but actually they're kind of similar in a way. In the ultra-Orthodox community, we have a situation where only 50% of the men work. About 70%, 75% of the women work. It's more or less on the level as other Israelis, but the men work lowest numbers in the country. Now, when you look at why that is, of course, you have your religious political reasons and also educational reasons, which come from religious political reasons. So, for example, the curriculum, the school curriculum for ultra-Orthodox men stops teaching them math when they're 11 years old. So it's like the Amish, a little bit like the Amish in America, which means that a man that doesn't want to spend his life in yeshiva, in studying Torah his whole life, has very few options, for good jobs because they don't have a high school diploma. They stop learning any secular subjects, including math, at age 11. They're completely unprepared for a professional world. And so what happens is that most of them ending up in a yeshiva world. Many of them are completely inappropriate for that. They can't sit still for 8 hours a day, whatever it is. There's a lot of kids and then become young men in yeshiva who actually shouldn't be there. But somehow, because of the way that the cultural and religious setup, they end up there. And only 50% eventually, after they finish their yeshiva studies, they continue, only 50% work. Now that means that this population, which is already like 25% of our city, their work productivity, their workforce productivity is very, very low. So that's the ultra-Orthodox. Now, the Arabs have similar but different story. The Arabs have an educational system, which unfortunately, 90% of the kids studying in East Jerusalem schools, even though Israel pays for those schools, about 60-70% funding, they don't teach Hebrew. And of course, this is for political reasons. But ultimately, putting politics aside, what that means is that you have 18-year-olds graduating, Arab 18-year-olds graduating, and they can't speak the language of the city which they live in, which means they can't go to further education because they don't speak the language. Imagine if you're living in a town in London that only teaches you French, and then you have to go to UK university, and you only speak French. So that's the situation in East Jerusalem. And on top of that, of course, you have an education, they adopt the Palestinian school book, which has got incitement, anti-Semitism, glorification of martyrdom, and a complete denial of the existence of the State of Israel. We're not on their maps. Their maps are completely replaced with Arab names for Tel Aviv and for everything else. We're not in their math books. The questions are, 10 people died in jihad in the first intifada, 20 people died in jihad in the second intifada. How many people died? How many Jews did this one and that one kill? These are even the math questions in the Palestinian Authority school book, which unfortunately is still the school book being used in my city for 90% of the students. So those are the main problems. And of course, it ends up becoming a gender issue, because what happens is that at 18, the boys go and work in construction or in supermarkets, delivery, whatever job they can get, and they learn Hebrew on the street. The girls get married early, they have children, they don't go out to work. And then when they're like 26, 27, and the kids are getting a little older and they understand they need to bring an income for their family, they go and they want to try and get a job, and all they can do is get a job as cleaners in a hotel because they don't speak the language. The men learned on streets, but the women didn't go out to the streets. They didn't go out to jobs. And so they don't end up speaking any Hebrew. And that's why it's a gender issue. So that's the situation for the Arabs. So and their workforce productivity is high for men, but for women is the lowest in the entire Middle East. So the workforce participation of Arab women is in the region of 22, 23%, and it's gone up from 18, 19% by the stuff that we've been doing. So we're already improved the situation for Arab women, and hopefully we'll continue to improve. So that is kind of the main economic challenge. Of course, we have other minority groups in the city who have economic challenges, such as immigrant groups like Ethiopians, etc. But their numbers are not large like the ultra-Orthodox and the Arabs. The numbers of the ultra-Orthodox Arabs really, really affect the entire productivity of the city. So that's one of the main problems, which is economic. Let's talk a little second about the political problems. So in Jerusalem, actually, whatever you hear, we live together. Jews and Arabs, Christians live together. All of us work together. We go to the same gyms, malls, when they're open after Corona, please God. Gyms, malls, workplaces, and public spaces. So anything you hear that Jerusalem is a divided city, an apartheid city, put that to the side, because that's not the reality. The only thing I can say is that people live in separate neighborhoods. So I don't live in an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, and ultra-Orthodox people don't generally live in my neighborhood. I don't live in an Arab neighborhood, and Arabs generally don't live in my neighborhood. Of course, there's exceptions. So apart from the fact that people live in neighborhoods, which I think happens everywhere, you have Jewish neighborhoods in London, Manchester, it happens here too. Apart from that reality, there's no division here. There's no border, there's no physical division of the majority of the city. And everybody works and uses the same public spaces, hospitals, cinemas. We live a joint life here. And I think it's very important, and I'll come back to this. So that's the political reality. Now, the political challenges are that the Arabs of East Jerusalem, even though they can vote in municipal elections, they choose not to vote. Many of them are not choosing, of course. Many of them have been forced not to vote by the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, who basically threaten them because they say that it's a statement on sovereignty, so they encourage them not to vote. And the net result of that is that they don't have representation in my city council. So somebody like me, who's a pluralist, who believes that everybody has a place in my city, ends up representing them as well as everybody else that I represent. But if they had their own representation, it would be much better for them to get more resources. It's just, that's the way politics works. You have less of a voice if you don't have representation. But they shoot themselves in the foot. Many of them, of course, not voluntarily. Many of them are between a rock and a hard place and have a lot of sympathy for the Arabs who are under pressure from Hamas and other political groups in East Jerusalem. And so they have no representation in City Hall. That's one of the political issues. Another political issue, nothing to do with the Arabs, is Jews and Jews. Jerusalem, as you all know, is a holy city, but it's also a city that accepts everybody, every type of person. So of course we have secular people and we have communities of every kind. And what we feel, or at least pluralists like me, is that there's a place for everybody in our city. However, our city have people who sometimes don't believe that they can live together. And that's the problem. So the conflict, political conflict within us is always between the secular and the ultra-Orthodox. The ultra-Orthodox constantly trying to make the city more holy, more religious. Shabbat desecrations, they're trying to stop and curb. On the other hand, I see that if we want secular people in our city, we have to have something for them to do on Shabbat as well. I personally am religious, but I want everybody to live in my city. I don't want the city to be completely homogeneous and only have religious people. And I know that that's what I want because that is the character of our city. King David, a mythological king, built the city 2,500 years ago. And he picked Jerusalem to be the capital of his kingdom for one main reason. And that was because Jerusalem didn't belong to one particular tribe. Jerusalem was a piece of land that was between tribes. So Judah and Benjamin were nearby, but it wasn't a city that belonged to any one of those tribes. And so Jerusalem is, as a matter of DNA, a city that involves all tribes. It's a place where all tribes could gather. That's why the temple was built here, so that on holidays and the Jewish festivals, everybody could come to Jerusalem. And that was the unifying force of all the different tribes, Jerusalem. And so I believe that the character of Jerusalem is and must remain a character that is home to everybody and all streams of Judaism, as well as the ultra-Orthodox and as well as the completely secular. And it's very important for me because Jerusalem is not just the capital of my country, Jerusalem is the capital of the Jewish people. And if any Jew around the world cannot see themselves in Jerusalem, then we have a problem. Because Jerusalem belongs to all tribes. That's how King David set it up, and that is our character and our DNA. So those are the kind of political issues that we have amongst Jews. We've spoken about the issues between Jews and Arabs. And so what do we do with all of this? And where are the opportunities in Jerusalem? Now, I believe that where the biggest challenges are, also come the biggest opportunities. I believe in the very wise saying in the Torah, Mitzion titzeh Torah. From Zion is Jerusalem, Torah will emanate. But what does Torah mean? Torah doesn't just mean the 5 books and the commentaries. Torah means any learning or methodology that creates a peace or perfection in the world. The word Jerusalem is Yerushalayim. What is Yerushalayim? Yeru, you will see. Shalem, Yerushalem, that's where it comes from. You will see perfection, completion. And so I truly believe that any problem, any challenge we solve, either for the country, either for the region, or for the Jewish world in Jerusalem, the repercussions become something that goes everywhere. Mitzion, from Zion. When you find truth and completion and peace, it will emanate everywhere. And so just on a practical note, Jerusalem has the highest amount of social innovation nonprofits. All the best educational innovation in the country starts in Jerusalem. All the best cafes that go on to Tel Aviv, Roma, Hillel, started in Jerusalem. We have the most nonprofits per capita in the world in Jerusalem. We have a thriving innovation ecosystem, which I'm proud that I was amongst the people who got involved in creating it only 7 years ago. And we have a very special atmosphere in Jerusalem. And that is an atmosphere that even though we're the largest city in the country, we still all kind of act like we're in a village. So people are very helpful to each other. There's a saying, I've got an old friend who says that, you know, when you tell somebody in Tel Aviv, look, I'm doing this new venture, they'll go, amazing, good luck. When you say to somebody in Jerusalem, I've got this amazing new venture, they'll say, how can I help? And that really is the feeling here. And that goes across the board. Whoever you are, whatever your background, religion, people are helpful here. We feel a sense of pioneering, a sense of mission. And so that's one of our strengths. The other strength, which I have up until now presented as kind of a challenge, is our diversity. Diversity is only a strength. When you get a diverse group of people making a decision, that decision is ultimately better. A lot of people have lectured on this. I'm not the first one to talk about the fact that diversity creates better innovation. It's well known. And so I'm very proud to say that our diversity gives us an edge also in the startup nation. We've developed some amazing niches that we've even created from here. So for example, the autonomous vehicle was born here in Hebrew University, a professor that developed a whole discipline on computer vision. Biotech, all 30% of biotech of the country is created here because we have very strong research hospital. So these are kind of our arts, and culture is the strongest in the country. We have the best design and art schools in the country. And so all of this gives us unique advantages in moving forward. And what we really have to do, everybody here has equal rights. Don't get confused when people tell you that the Arabs don't. They do. Same healthcare, they have schooling, that unfortunately they choose to go to different schooling, but they have schooling from the city if they wish. They have the right to vote in the city. They have freedom of occupation, of course, of any job that they'd like. They have, you know, they come to universities and colleges like everybody else. And we provide even accelerator programs so that kids who are going to college can learn Hebrew in fast track so that they don't have to fall behind. So all of this are things that we're doing, innovating in order to bring equal opportunities. So there's a difference between equal rights and opportunities. Equal rights we have, equal opportunities we don't have. Because again, of the political, social, religious issues I explained to you at the beginning, you can point a million fingers, but ultimately this is the situation we have. We have to look forward and see how we make it better. Now, 3 years ago, a groundbreaking decision was passed by the government, and that was to close social gaps between East and West Jerusalem, between Arabs and Jews. And so a lot of resources were put into 3 things for Arab East Jerusalem. One is employment, quality employment. I want the Arabs of East Jerusalem, especially the young people, the new engineers, I want them to be part of the prosperity of the startup nation, because it's good for the whole city, it's good for all of us. Education we have budgets for, and of course, a development of infrastructure. At the moment, we are planning a huge high-tech park in East Jerusalem that'll be a game changer for jobs, for hospitality, and for commercial property. And this is slowly how we are bringing opportunity to everyone. With the ultra-Orthodox community, again, we provide a lot of scholarships for married men who want to leave the yeshiva world and get an occupation. You know, a lot of these guys who've been studying in yeshiva for many years are very smart, but they have to be kind of re-educated in a way because, like I said, they stopped learning math when they were 11 years old. And so we have opportunities in place to close those educational gaps and to help them with their studies in order for them to be able to have a good shot at also sharing the prosperity of the startup nation. And all of this is happening in Jerusalem. Also here, we're trying to find ways to bridge the gaps between the Orthodox and the ultra-Orthodox and the secular. All the major bridging programs, all the major programs that put together and curate meetings and initiatives between religious and non-religious people are born here in the city, and from here they spread out towards the country. And so even though we have the most difficult challenges, we also have the most exciting opportunities, because whatever we manage to do here, like I said earlier, will spread across the country, the region, and the world. I just want to add one more thing before we maybe we take some questions. That I just come back from a week in Dubai, where I feel like I've been in the front line of history, building a warm peace for the first time with an Arab country. Of course, we have peace with Egypt and we have peace with Jordan, but that's a very top-down peace, a peace for leaders, but not a peace for people to people. And what we have here with the UAE and with Bahrain, Sudan, and hopefully Saudi Arabia very soon, is a peace that is not just been, that doesn't just stop at the signing of the peace accords, it starts there, and it's going to be made by people to people, business to business. And I'm very proud that I've co-founded the UAE Israel Business Council in order to create those bridges for businesses to businesses. I believe that doing business with people creates trust, you break down cultural barriers, and it's the way to move forward. I also created the Gulf Israel Women's Forum, because I believe that women leaders can really push things along. We're very practical, we're consensus and peace builders, and we have to put women's power and ingenuity towards peace initiatives. I'm a big believer in that. And I've just come back from the most encouraging week of my time in politics, I say. I think it's almost like a window of what could be if we had peace in our region. And please God, we will have peace in our region very soon. I'm happy to answer any questions any of you would like to ask.
Great, thank you so much, Fleur. That was incredible. Before we get into the questions, would you be able to click on my name and make me host so I can...
I have to make you host? Hang on a second.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Make host, there we go. You've really fallen across the less technological person you're ever gonna meet. I just made you the host. Now don't block me.
Thank you very much. Okay, so while we give a bit of time for people to write a couple more questions, some questions of my own. Firstly, if you could recommend one book to someone seeking to understand Israel as a country, what would it be?
Oh my God. You know what, the best, but it's old now, that's the problem. No, one of the best books you can read is called The Siege by Conor Cruise O'Brien, but it stops in the 80s. Another book that I've gone back to is Benjamin Netanyahu, A Place Amongst Nations, which actually prophetically talks about what could be happening today. And if you want a kind of very balanced view, the only book that I've ever read that puts the Israeli narrative and the Palestinian narrative side by side is Ari Shavitz's book, My Promised Land. It's really the only book I've ever read that doesn't, two very opposing narratives, but somehow one narrative doesn't take away from the other. So that's kind of if you're in the kind of coexistence mode. And the others are if you want to kind of learn the political facts and realities on the ground. Jerusalem is a great book, Simon Sebag Montefiore, and that's of course the history of my city. It's a long book. I'm still reading, I mean, I've read about 10 other books as I'm reading Jerusalem, still reading it. Yeah.
Great. That's amazing. I mean, you briefly touched on this near the end of your talk, but would you be able to elaborate a bit more about why you think the role of women is so important in politics in general?
Yeah, I think that look, there's two types of feminists, right? There's the feminists that believe that we're all born the same and conditioning makes us different. And there's the feminists that believe that we're different, but we're equal. I'm that type of feminist. I don't believe men and women are the same. I'm actually very happy we're not. It would be very boring if we were. And I don't think it's because of conditioning. I've got 2 boys and 2 girls. I didn't, make pink rooms and blue rooms and any of that. And I've got 2 very girly girls and 2 very boys. And that's because men and women are different, equal but different. So I believe we have complementary strengths. And I think that women can be natural leaders if we only believe we can be, and if we only had enough role models around us to encourage young girls to take leadership positions. Instead, you get young girls with leadership skills being told you're too bossy. That's what I was told, you're a chatterbox, you're bossy. And so girls kind of see it as a negative thing. They see it as it's like their femininity is kind of affronted by the fact that they're assertive. And that's why there's less women in politics, if you ask me, than there should be. Now, in the Israeli government, in the parliament, there's 25% women, not good enough. In my city council, there's 20% women. And I believe that if we want a balanced world with balanced decision, you have to have a balanced table of decision makers. Women and men think differently, but that's a good thing. Women see things many times from a completely different point of view, but that's a point of view that needs to be at the table. I mean, I could get into the cliches that women are more empathetic, they listen more. It's true. We do. And I think that those are only strengths in leadership. Building consensus. I had a committee. I was in charge of the Jerusalem Preservations Committee. Imagine a 1,000-year-old city, and I'm in charge of its preservation. I'm talking about buildings pre-1948. I never made a decision in my committee that was not one made by consensus. I'm not sure a lot of other people can say that, and I attribute that to the fact that I'm a woman and I'm a mother, and I know how to kind of build consensus. And so I do believe that women have a special role in peace building. I do believe that women have a role in leadership, and I will not be quiet until women are 50% of decision makers, because we're 50% of the people affected by the decision. And I have to say something else. The decisions that women make are not just better for women, they're better for men too. When you look at, for example, divorce law in religious courts are a disaster for women here because it's only men making those decisions. But divorce courts in civil law are very discriminatory against men. Men, divorced fathers have very little rights. And I have enormous sympathy. And I tell them this, if we were in charge, we would be more sympathetic to you. And so it's up to it. Men have to realize that they are in a healthier position, not just women. If women are 50% of those decision makers, it's not just good for men, for women, it's good for men too. So that's what I have to say. Of course, I could give a whole hour's lecture on women's leadership. That's where I'm going to stop.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely very lucid insights, particularly the point on how women's maternal instincts and just the challenges they face make them more resilient and more likely to be leaders in that way.
We're definitely very resilient.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we briefly talked about now how the difference between how boys and girls are educated, but I think it would be a nice segue to go into the first question that we got from our audience, which is about the Palestinian education system. So you talked briefly about how their school books are very outdated and incredibly inflammatory, and wish to drive this conflict further. So would you believe that the first point of change would be the Palestinian school books? Is that how we...
100%, 100%. I was in the House of Lords in your lovely country in January with one purpose. I addressed a cross-party group about the fact that the UK government supports the UNRWA organization, which is the UN Organization for Rights of Workers Association. The Palestinians are the only nation that actually have their own UN committee or department dedicated to them, refugees committee, even though 4 generations living in the same place. And they 55% of their funding goes to education. And the UK gives the money for the Palestinian education. Now, I wrote a letter, an open letter to Boris Johnson when he started telling Israel don't annex. And I said, listen, I love you, you're a friend, everything you want, but if you want to talk about what's impeding peace, it's not annexation. It's the fact that children are being brainwashed to hate us and you're funding it. And so I'm going country to country, telling people, not only are you not bringing peace, you're taking us further away from peace by continuing to fund a Palestinian education system that is taking us further away from peace because it's teaching them to hate us, to dehumanize us, and to show them that the only option for them is for us to be kicked to the water. And that's exactly the Palestinian school books. So 100%, we have to start from the school books. And I'll tell you something else. When I was in Dubai last week, I asked a lot of the new friends that I made, I said to them, do you remember when incitement against Israel stopped in your school books? And they said, you know what? About 10 years ago. So imagine that. It's taken 10 years, and that's good, between the fact they stopped incitement and peace. So every day that Palestinian children continue learning from the same Palestinian school book is a day backwards towards peace. And I'm going to go door to door to explain that to every single government that is still funding those terrible, toxic school books.
Amazing. That question was from Elisheva, by the way. You may remember her.
Elisheva, I met her. You were going to be my intern. What happened? You got stuck.
Yeah. So now moving on to, again, something that was touched upon, the peace agreements. So Zach Messer asked this question. How do you think the peace agreements will change the dynamic both diplomatically and socially between Israelis and Arabs? And then he goes on to say that he understands there is a difference between what the government agrees to and how the population feels. How long do you think it will take, and how can we get the Arab populations on side?
I'll tell you how it's going to happen. By the free markets. Of course, we're going to have a lot of different bridge building initiatives. My own take on this, I went to the UAE and I said to them, I need your help for my Arab constituents in my city. In other words, we're building a high-tech park, come and invest in it. We are building a high-tech park to bring big high-tech companies, come and open a high-tech company here. I want to provide jobs for the Arab residents of my city, help me. So I believe that this is going to happen. I believe that we're going to get a fantastic, look, the Palestinian Authority media machine is one thing. Most of the Arabs from East Jerusalem that I'm speaking to are excited. You know how many tourism people there are in East Jerusalem? Hotels in East Jerusalem, tour guides, bus drivers, everything. They're very heavily involved in the tourism industry. We're going to have a brand new tourism, Muslim tourism, that didn't exist before, coming from the Gulf. This is a fantastic opportunity. So I think the free market is going to do its work and prosperity will come. And when prosperity comes and everybody's involved in that prosperity, which is what I'm trying to do, nobody will be complaining. On the contrary, it'll force the Palestinians to sit down at the table. They have refused to sit down and talk to Israel since the beginning of the Obama years. So imagine how long that is already. They've refused, not us.
I mean, do you believe that the primary motivation of these Arab states is peace seeking? Or do you think their intentions are pure?
Yes, I think no, they're not. Everybody has interests. There's two different things. The people I've met are the most wonderful, warm people I've met in my life. So that aside, there's two interests. One is there's a realignment of the Middle East between the countries of the Muslim Brotherhood and the countries against the Muslim Brotherhood. UAE hates the Muslim Brotherhood. Turkey loves the Muslim Brotherhood. And so there's a realignment. And, you know, and that we have common interests, we have common enemies. So that's one interest. The second interest is that the UAE people are very strategic and very smart. They know that in 30 years, oil is over. So they're looking for renewable energy technology. They're looking for the kind of innovation, ecosystem injection of energy that we have in the startup nation. And for those reasons, they're looking for this. And we're looking for this because for us, the UAE is the gateway to the East. Israel's always been very west facing. This allows us to look to the East because Dubai is the logistical and financial hub of the Middle East. We are very well suited. We're both two very advanced Middle Eastern economies. And so there's an economic interest here, there's a security interest here, there's a political interest here. But when all I felt when I was there was a real thirst for peace. When we met, and I met new people and we had my forum there, everybody felt like they'd met long lost cousins. And that's something very special that I can't describe. And I'm very excited about it.
That sounds incredible. We have time for 2 more questions. So this one is from Abel Miller. I hope I got the name correct. She says, or he says, growing up in the USA, I have certainly seen anti-Semitism grow, worryingly within the Democrat Party. Mrs. Hassan-Nahoum, due to the fundamental role Trump and Jared Kushner have played in forming the peace deals you've spoken to, are you concerned about a potential breakdown in furthering these discussions should the White House flip to Joe Biden?
That's a good question. And I can't, as an Israeli politician, comment on a foreign race or say who I would prefer. But all I can tell you is that the Jared Kushner Trump initiative has really changed the conversation for the better. They got it. They got the Middle East. Obama was in power for 8 years and the Palestinians didn't sit at the table because they had such high expectations from Obama that nothing was good enough for them. And Trump came, and I always say Obama put the Palestinians up a tree and Trump came and chopped it down. And Trump has come and has said, there's no reason why Israel can't be normalized with the Arab world. Why should we not recognize the reality that Jerusalem is the capital city of the state of Israel? More than that in any future peace deal, Jerusalem will remain the capital city of it's just a fact. And the fact that sometimes it takes somebody like Trump to come and shake the kind of paradigms everybody got used to living with, and these paradigms that were old and outdated. And I have a lot of friends from the Friedman Embassy, David Friedman. And so, you know, I think I can't comment on domestic policy, but in foreign policy, Trump, Kushner, Friedman, and all the other people, Avi Berkovich, have got it right. And that's all I can say about that.
That's great. So I guess the last question we'll have today, thank you again for your time. And thank you for all the questions that we got from our audience. Slightly more, I guess, a more modern topic, something that we've especially seen on the rise in the past couple of years, environmental issues. We've seen Apple recently announce their plan to be carbon neutral by 2030. We've also seen, I mean, McDonald's, these massive franchises just leaning towards more environmentally friendly missions. So the question is now, what kind of budget does Jerusalem have to put into cleaning up Jerusalem and educating the different communities on how to be more green, to use plastic and one-time silverware, plates, cups, etc.?
So I want to say a few things about that. In terms of cleaning Jerusalem, the cleanliness of Jerusalem, this mayor, it's his flagship project. The city's much cleaner. He's put more trucks in place and more cleaning stuff. And whoever, please God, when you'll come back, you'll see for yourself that it's really improved dramatically. Now, I actually got a sustainability advisor in the city, a guy who actually runs a zero plastic, zero waste forums. Israel is one of the worst offenders of plastic use. Why? Because we Jews have a lot of communal meals, and the women who are exhausted, and I say women because a lot of these people are ultra-Orthodox, and it's mainly the women, use plastic plates because they have 20 children and it's easier for them. So we have to find a way of legislating against plastic, and it's not a city issue, unfortunately, it's a national issue. And we've got the plastic bag law that went through that for supermarkets, etc., but we're very much lagging behind on the plastics issue. On the rest of the energy, we're very energy efficient. So Israel has had solar panels for 50 years. Who can say that? I've got a solar panel, as every other Israeli and Arab and everybody else living around here has solar panels. So we actually are very good on energy conservation, and we're very bad on plastics. So I'm with you. I think there's a lot that needs to be done. Unfortunately, it's not a city issue. It's more a national issue. And of course, in the city, we have recycling and all the other things. And in schools, there is awareness, and there are, kids constantly doing projects. In the last year, I tried to get schools to adopt permanent trays rather than plastic trays that get thrown away. Again, this is all very expensive infrastructure and staff time, but we took 2 schools, we did a pilot, slowly we're getting there. We're not great on plastics, but like I said, we're good on energy conservation.
Solar panels in Jerusalem is a bit like wind turbines in Norway. They're like a no-brainer.
Well, the whole of Israel has solar panels. It's fantastic. But yeah. you see many hot countries. I come from Gibraltar. We have solar panels. It's the same as here. So it's about awareness education. Of course, Israel did that out of energy necessity in its time. And now, look, we're ahead of the game.
That's great. Well, thank you again for an incredible talk, Fleur.
Thank you, Ethan.
We will wish you incredibly well and good luck on all of your initiatives in both domestic and international politics. And yeah, we hope you have a great year. Thank you.
Well, I hope you all can come back very soon.
Yeah.
And see you back here. And thanks again for all the work we do. I know that I was supposed to come to the UK. Do you remember? I was supposed to come to the UK and do a speaking tour in a few universities, and it got cancelled because of the corona. So hopefully when we get to better times, I'll be happy to do that tour.
Yeah, next year, hopefully. Thank you.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Bye.